Late 2017, sisters Elizabeth and Sarah got home from a walk in El Dorado and were confronted by their mom's boyfriend. The man punched 13-year-old Elizabeth in the face several times. When her 16-year-old sister Sarah tried to jump in, he hit her in the face too. Elizabeth was left unconscious. When police arrived, they found her shaken, in tears, her face swollen. The man responsible was charged with third-degree domestic battery, a misdemeanor.
The infliction of some injury, which could be swelling, redness, whatnot.
The suspect was sentenced to 72 months for possession of a firearm because he kept a gun in his bedroom. For knocking out the 13-year-old, the misdemeanor, he got 30 days, time served.
I mean, a misdemeanor's punishable up to a year in the county jail, whereas felonies are punishable by incarceration in the Department of Correction. So in that regard, it's a lesser offense.
The ACLU of Arkansas says this shows the need for sentencing reform.
Really, we need to be re-examining all of our sentencing laws and practices.
In our research of inmates released early due to COVID-19, we found multiple plea deals leading to sentencing on nonviolent crimes, while other violent crimes were dismissed.
It's always beneficial if the state and the defense can get together on a sentence that is considered fair to all sides and therefore avoid the time and expense of a trial.
The suspect was charged as an habitual offender on the gun charge, and it's a felony, so the prosecutor negotiated a longer sentence than he could have on the violent charges. It's a common tactic when pleading drug cases, too, partly because some drug charges come with harsher sentences, especially for habitual offenders.
Sometimes this results in life behind bars for drug offenses, where people who committed violent offenses may serve far less time.
Prosecuting attorney Matt Durrett says these types of plea deals can be what's best for the inmates.
An Arkansas Community Correction that's available for nonviolent offenders, and it focuses more on rehabilitation. It could be a situation like that, where if you plead someone to a violent offense, they're not eligible for that.
Still, the ACLU wants to see another way.
We should be investing in programs that actually help individuals improve themselves and make the entire community better.
An idea that would have to be discussed during the legislative session.
Their punishments that the legislature set, they've considered them appropriate.
So prosecutors will continue to work for the best deal. Back to the man in El Dorado, that 2017 plea deal was not his only one. 2 years later, he reportedly fired shots during a fight. The plea deal led to prison time for having the gun, but once again, no punishment for his violent actions. For years, Debbie received violent threats from a family member.
And I'm not the only person that this has happened to. In 1 year, he raped 6 females.
Debbie is one of his victims.
2 months after I was raped, my daughter, the middle one, she almost tried to commit suicide. So it's been a downhill battle and up and down with me and my kids and my family.
Now he's out of jail, granted early release due to COVID-19. A privilege meant for non-violent, non-sexual offenders. 3
of his parole officers have stated that he was a menace to society. He's a menace to society. How are you going to release him?
But the Arkansas Department of Corrections says this man qualifies because his accusers didn't file in criminal court, only civil cases to ask for orders of protection. 5 people have active orders of protection against him. But he was in prison on a non-violent crime.
A lot of domestic violence survivors either haven't had the opportunity or just simply wanted to make a break and left and never pressed charges.
Nearly 1,000 inmates are now approved for early release due to COVID-19.
I've asked for a review of all nonviolent offenders who are non-sex offenders that are due for release within the next 6 months.
We went through the records and found dozens of nonviolent offenders with a violent past. Many have orders of protection against them for claims of domestic abuse.
There's a lot of complicating factors in domestic abuse, like drug use.
When a woman breaks away from abuse, she can find refuge with organizations like Saving Grace.
We hear how valuable it was to them to be able to sleep at night and not worry who was going to come in the door.
But Development Director Stacy Seeger says that comfort shifts when an abuser gets out of prison.
That sudden shock of wondering if they're going to be safe. Is that person going to find me? Is my abuser going to be able to track me down?
I talked to another victim, Heather. She told me her abuser should never have been set free. He was criminally charged with a violent crime, domestic battery, but he avoided jail time on that charge by taking a plea deal. The battery charge was dropped, so he was only sentenced for drugs, a non-violent offense.
It's not unusual for a defense attorney to come back and say, my client will plead to this, but he says he's not guilty of that. So if you can drop that, he'll plead guilty.
Of the 500 plus cases we reviewed, we found 45 suspects who either had orders of protection against them or had a domestic battery charge that was pleaded down. That does not include plea deals we found that eliminated other violent charges like aggravated assault with a firearm, even second-degree battery on a law enforcement officer. Prosecuting attorney Matt Durrett says these types of deals go down for several reasons.
You may have a situation where you have a victim who's not cooperative, or a victim that doesn't want to proceed on a charge.
Seeger says that's very common in domestic cases.
A victim will return to the abuser 7 times before they are able to actually break free of that abuse situation.
Those who have broken free, like Debbie and Heather, must now rely on their orders of protection.
We shouldn't have to fear for our lives like that, especially when we didn't do nothing wrong.
They'll have to wait to see and hope they work. Drug possession landed John Hendon at the Cummins units just before an outbreak of COVID-19.
You didn't really want to be around nobody, but you couldn't really go anywhere.
It was the state's first major outbreak at a prison.
I think the guards tried, but they didn't really know what to do because the guy above them didn't really know what to do.
Hendon says meals were delayed.
The longest we ate between meals one time was 24 hours between a whole meal.
Quarantining was hardly an option.
We couldn't even go to work to make face masks to help out because they didn't, I guess we were quarantined, but there were 60 people. And,
There have been more than 4,600 cases of COVID-19 in correctional facilities, nearly 1,000 of those at Cummins. When the numbers reached about 400, Hendon said he got the news.
And I was sitting there, go packing stuff. I'm like, are you sure you got my number right?
He was one of 907 nonviolent offenders approved for early release due to the spread of COVID-19. But the state can't just release hundreds of inmates. First, they need a parole plan.
Food, clothing, jobs, mental health services, and then we also do housing.
Nick Robbins with the nonprofit Returning Home gives parolees a transitional home for 90 days. But the program only has 67 beds.
Right now, on average, we're accepting 11% of the applications that come to us.
And that was before the decision to release the 907 inmates.
When that happened, we actually expanded. So our residential provider, Phoenix Recovery, expanded their beds by 17%. So when donations start to go down, we decided to ramp things up.
But the other services, jobs, mental health care, food, didn't expand. Those are on hold as the virus forced their partners to furlough staff and scale back at a time when parolees are in need.
Just this week, I got this message from a guy, and he just goes, "Are you open?" And I go, "No, I'm sorry. Is there something I can do over online?" And he sent a thing. He goes, "But I need you the most right now." And it's just heartbreaking because all these people are being released, and all these nonprofits that would normally be there to help are struggling themselves.
A lack of these services leads to a high number of parolees ending up back behind bars. An Arkansas Department of Corrections study was released just this year. Of the 10,600 inmates released in 2015, half were back in prison within 3 years. In a 2018 survey of Arkansas parolees who wound up back in prison, 60% said employment opportunities was the most needed resource. For another 15%, it was housing.
When you get out of jail, you get out of prison tomorrow, you don't even have a place to live, to quarantine, to even file for unemployment because you weren't employed. It's very sad and it's very difficult.
Hendon, like a lot of Arkansans right now, has not found work, but he does have a bed. He paroled to his daughter's house, a much better option than prison.
It's just something I wouldn't wish on nobody.
For now, he's happy to be healthy and spending time with his 4 grandkids.
I just can't be any happier. And I'm never going back.